One of our most influential pastors has just experienced an unthinkable event. A man renowned for his resolute presence, best-selling books, and stirring sermons as Bishop T.D. Jakes now finds himself in the middle of an unexpected storm. This isn't your average headline, it's shocking, emotional, and personal. What happened recently has left millions in shock, and many are wondering how this could have happened, regardless of whether you respect his voice of hope or doubt his growing influence. The story is more complex than anyone could have imagined, ranging from online rumors to shocking turns that rocked the church and society. Be patient before drawing conclusions. This goes beyond fame, faith, or wealth. It has to do with something much more human. Your preconceived notions will be called into question by what you're about to hear. Stay with us because this painful moment is just the start. The nation was rocked by this moment. More than 2.3 million people worldwide witnessed the nightmare that was supposed to be a potent day of celebration at the Potter's House on November 24, 2024. Bishop T.D. Jakes stood firm in front of over 12,000 worshippers in Dallas and millions more online as he delivered a sermon titled Strength and Weakness. However, exactly at 10:37 a.m., he said, "O Lord, my strength, my Redeemer, let them go in peace. Lord, my Savior and strength, please grant them peace." All of a sudden, he stopped talking. With a loud thud, the microphone fell from his grasp and hit the floor, leaving the sanctuary in a chilly silence. Jake's entire body shook. He rolled his eyes back, and his skin became gray. It was a disturbing sight that caused the crowd to go crazy. When a medical emergency arose during the service, the congregation quickly became agitated. Some attendees cried out, while others prayed or spoke in tongues as a result of the emotional reaction. Several elderly people seemed overwhelmed and needed help, according to witnesses. Operation Shepherd staff, the church's established emergency protocol, was triggered in response. In a matter of seconds, a cardiologist sitting close to the front of the sanctuary arrived to examine Jakes. The head of security started escorting people out of the sanctuary in a systematic way at the same time, and an usher returned with an automated external defibrillator, EED, in less than 30 seconds. The quick response was aided by emergency preparedness exercises the church had recently held. Congregants could be heard yelling during the live stream that was captured and uploaded to YouTube, while Jake stayed still. Paramedics arrived just 4 minutes after the collapse and gave fluids and emergency medication. It had been a day to commemorate the Potter's House's founding 28 years prior, but now it was a race to save the life of its adored leader. Crucial was the church's helipad, which had only been put in a year and a half earlier. After a swift landing, a medical helicopter flew for 7 tense minutes to take Jakes to Methodist Dallas Medical Center. His arrival signaled the start of a demanding 9-hour surgery and 17 days in the intensive care unit. Both the church community and the general public eagerly awaited any new developments. In the hours and days that followed the incident, social media was ablaze with rumors. Did he have a heart attack, stroke, or something else? There were rumors of everything from bizarre conspiracy theories to covert health battles. Amidst the cacophony, one thing was evident. A potentially fatal incident was live-streamed to millions of people. For many, it was more than just a preacher's downfall. It was as if a spiritual giant had fallen. The incident served as a reminder to people everywhere of how easily even the strongest of us can become weak. And it prepared T.D. Jakes for what would turn out to be one of the most fierce and intimate conflicts of his career. A life of suffering, meaning, and preaching. Thomas Dexter T.D. Jakes lived a quiet, sometimes difficult life in South Charleston, West Virginia, before he rose to become one of the most powerful pastors in the world. During a period of extreme racial division in America, he was born on June 9, 1957, and raised in the segregated community of Vandalia. His mother, Odette, was a home economics teacher who taught her children competence, discipline, and faith. His father, Ernest, was a diligent businessman who established a prosperous cleaning company that employed dozens. Life was difficult for Jakes, the youngest of 3 siblings, even though the family's home was full of love and education. In his early life, racial tensions, financial strain, and limited opportunities were all present. The news that his father had kidney disease rocked T.D.'s world when he was only 10 years old. Jakes developed into a youthful caregiver during the ensuing 6 years. assisting his mother in taking care of his father's needs while silently carrying the burden of his family's hardship. He started to turn to faith for comfort during this time. He would withdraw into his bedroom and pretend to be a preacher while addressing stuffed animals. Bible Boy was the moniker given to him because of his intense interest in the Bible and the spiritual realm. He had always been fascinated by God's mysteries. During a trip with his father, he once thought carefully about a lesson he had learned: even though it seems to be still, the earth is always moving. The notion of invisible motion turned into a metaphor for God's involvement in his life. When T.D. was just 16, tragedy struck once more. A personal and practical void was left when his father lost his fight with kidney disease. His mother also became ill shortly after, as if that weren't enough. In order to take care of her, Jakes had to make the tough choice to leave high school just 2 months before graduation due to growing pressure at home. It was an agonizing sacrifice that made him wonder about God's purpose for his life. He struggled with feelings of loss, confusion, and rage that might have ruined his future. Nevertheless, he started to experience a divine pull during that grieving period, an unwavering feeling that he was being prepared for something bigger in spite of the difficulties. Jake's decision to enter ministry in his early 20s helped him to better understand that calling. In a modest shop in Montgomery, West Virginia, he established his first church, the Greater Emmanuel Temple of Faith, at the age of 23. At that time, there were only 10 members. He supported the small congregation and his family by working in a chemical plant during the day. He dedicated his nights to preaching. With his wife Sarita by his side, offering assistance where she could, Jakes established a ministry based on suffering, meaning, and hope. Being a young caregiver, a dropout, and a grieving son gave him a unique authenticity that made it possible for him to relate to broken, underappreciated people. Despite the hardships he endured in his early years, they served as the cornerstone of a ministry that would eventually reach millions. My determination, my intensity, and my sense that God was going to work in my life were never destroyed by my circumstances. The man and the message that would motivate future generations would be defined by that inner fire and his refusal to let adversity dictate his fate. From shop to colossal church. The T.D. Seeds. With only a modest storefront church in Montgomery, West Virginia, a young man resolute in preaching hope, and no marketing team, television cameras, or multi-million-dollar buildings, Jake's spiritual empire was buried in neglect. Jakes had a modest early ministry. At first, there were fewer than a dozen members of the Greater Emmanuel Temple of Faith, and he frequently had to serve in several capacities, including pastor, janitor, musician, and counselor, in order to provide for his expanding family while working a full-time job. However, his sermons had an indisputable impact even in those humble surroundings. Those who heard him experienced a profoundly personal connection as he spoke with unadulterated emotion and vulnerability, frequently drawing from his own hardships. Slowly but steadily, word spread. His little church started to attract people who were looking for something more than custom. What they desired was change. From a whisper in the West Virginia hills to a voice echoing across the country, Jake's ministry changed over the course of the following few years. In 1996, he felt the need to grow and took a risk by relocating to Dallas, Texas, a city with lots of promise but no guarantees. Just a few families supported Jake's idea when he started what would eventually become the Potter's House. It was difficult in Dallas in the beginning. They borrowed equipment, rented a space, and depended on volunteers, but his sermons grabbed attention right away. The congregation's size skyrocketed within 6 months, surpassing the capacity of their makeshift residence. Jakes took the lead in the church's daring acquisition of a sprawling 28-acre campus, which represented the breadth of his goals and the depth of his faith. Not only did numbers increase, but so did the impact. His messages were genuine and had the ability to heal people from all walks of life. The Potter's House evolved into a center of international ministry as the years went by. Jakes created a movement in addition to a church. Weekly services attracted tens of thousands of people online and thousands in person. In addition to expanding its campuses in places like Fort Worth and Denver, the church started airing its services around the world. The spirit, not just the size, was what made the Potter's House unique. Jakes concentrated on helping those who were broken, unnoticed, and desirous of a connection to something divine but had abandoned religion. His teachings on emotional recovery, reconciliation, and fortitude struck a deep chord, particularly with women in underrepresented groups. Women's and Thou Art Loosed conferences grew to be enormous gatherings, filling stadiums and attracting people from all over the world. People were changed by the environment his ministry created, not just by attending. The Potter's House was transformed into more than a church thanks to Jake's strategic vision and unwavering work ethic, despite the difficulties that accompanied this enormous expansion. It was established as an institution. The church had more than 30,000 members by the middle of the 2000s, and it had established ministries ranging from business development to prisoner rehabilitation. By forming alliances in the fields of politics, media, and entertainment, Jakes kept growing his power. But his anchor was still the Potter's House. Every sermon, outreach, and program was a component of a bigger picture. What started as a small congregation in a small town had grown into one of the most potent spiritual centers in the world, providing a safe haven where spiritual, emotional, and even financial healing could take place. A living example of what can be created with faith, vision, and tenacity. The impact of T.D. Jakes extended beyond the walls of the church. Beyond the pulpit, his vision was expansive. As his sermons became more and more popular across the country, Jakes started to express himself through writing. Woman, Thou Art Loosed was his top-selling book. Struck a chord with millions of readers, especially women who had experienced abuse, rejection, or abandonment, and became a publishing phenomenon. The book's unvarnished, compassionate tone and potent healing message reflected the breadth of his sermon's emotional content, solidifying his status as both a literary and spiritual leader. It was no coincidence that this success occurred. Jakes was aware of the power of narrative and employed it to fill in gaps between the public and the church community. With over 20 million copies sold worldwide, he wrote over 40 books in a variety of genres, including leadership, personal development, and spiritual guidance. His novels frequently reached the top of bestseller lists, establishing him as one of America's most renowned writers. After observing the influence of Woman, Thou Art Loosed in print, Jakes bravely entered the film industry, making a full-length film out of the book. It was a commercial and cultural success, demonstrating that audiences outside of traditional church settings could be attracted by faith-based stories. He then founded TDJ Enterprises, a media and entertainment business that creates movies, music, and other content with moral principles at their core but presented with Hollywood style and professionalism. He produced blockbusters like Miracles from Heaven and Jumping the Broom under this banner, which together brought in over $100 million at the box office. Faith-based media reached new heights thanks to these projects, which featured diverse casts and emotionally charged stories that addressed real-life issues without resorting to archaic religious cliches. Being able to present profound spiritual truths in formats that are culturally appropriate made Jakes one of the few religious leaders with actual influence in the entertainment sector. Jake also used television as a major medium to spread his message. He introduced his brand of inspirational, enlightening dialogue into millions of homes with shows like The Potter's Touch and a brief stint with his own syndicated talk show. Any tongue that rises against you will be condemned by God. He would have you in the ground if you were in his hand. There was more to these broadcasts than just sermons. They featured interviews, observations on daily life, and social commentary. Jake demonstrated on TV that he could communicate with both believers and skeptics, always with authority, empathy, and a dash of charm. Because of his media acumen, he was also able to form digital alliances, such as a contract with streaming services to produce carefully selected sermon archives and motivational material for audiences who had time to spare. As a result, his lessons were easier to understand than before, particularly to the younger generations, who are more likely to access spiritual content on their devices than during traditional church services. By doing this, he put himself at the vanguard of a new wave of digital religion. Beyond books and screens, Jakes focused on economic empowerment, one of the most important problems facing marginalized communities. Through the T.D. Jakes Foundation and TDJ Enterprises, he led large-scale urban renewal real estate projects, creation of jobs and reasonably priced housing. In cities like Atlanta and Miami, Jakes emerged as a major force in reviving underprivileged areas through business development, strategic investment, and charitable giving. Hundreds of millions of dollars were invested in projects that seek to bridge the wealth gap and give useful resources to those who are frequently left behind thanks to his collaborations with banks and developers. Faith in the face of criticism. Theological criticism has been leveled at Bishop T.D. Jakes despite his success and broad influence. How he articulated the Christian doctrine of the Trinity is one of the most contentious and enduring issues surrounding him. According to traditional Christian orthodoxy, God is a triune being consisting of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Nevertheless, Jakes has long referred to these divine features as manifestations. Theologians and pastors were alarmed by the term because they believed it echoed modalism, a heresy that denies the Trinity's unique personhood. At the 2012 Elephant Room Conference, Jakes tried to make his stance clear by stating that there is only one God in three persons, but he also reiterated his preference for the term manifestations. As a result, many members of the religious community were perplexed and split. He was accused by critics of being theologically ambiguous or of attempting to balance orthodoxy and popular appeal, while supporters contended that he was merely employing biblical language in a more poetic and less dogmatic manner. Because Jakes' doctrinal position was unclear, it sparked a larger discussion about theological accuracy in mega-ministry contexts. Many appreciated his focus on grace, healing, and self-determination, but others believed there was room for doctrinal error because he was reluctant to strictly adhere to creeds and confessions. Concerns were heightened by the fact that his church's website kept using the term manifestations 4 years after the Elephant Room incident. This raised concerns among some academics and pastors. Whereas others, considering the results of his ministry, viewed it as irrelevant. But the question was still there. Could someone maintain a radically different conception of God from the centuries-old Christian consensus and still be a spiritual leader on such a large scale? It overshadowed a legacy that was otherwise inspirational for many conservative believers. Jakes' messages of blessings and prosperity have also been consistently criticized. The main contention is that his teachings are too similar to the prosperity gospel, which holds that success, faith, and obedience will bring about material gain and physical well-being. Jakes has made a number of public declarations implying that God's favor appears in tangible forms, such as the frequently cited statement, "If you obey God, you will never be broke again." While some find inspiration in these statements, which encourage them to believe for better, others find them troubling because they believe that the gospel's emphasis on sacrifice, service, and spiritual development is distorted. Critics contend that using such language runs the risk of making God into a commodity. Giving and praying will result in blessings. People who have strong religious beliefs but are dealing with poverty or chronic illness may find such messaging to be manipulative or even alienating. The way Jakes himself lives adds even more complexity to the story. For critics, his multi-million-dollar mansion, fancy cars, and designer suits have come to represent his wealth, which they say undermines the humility that spiritual leaders are supposed to exhibit. Even though Jakes has openly denied being a prosperity preacher, citing his diligence, business endeavors, and commitment to uplifting others instead, his style of ministry is still seen by some as being dangerously close to spiritual consumerism. People need spiritual prosperity before they can have financial prosperity, Jakes has argued in his own defense, indicating that his emphasis is still on inner transformation before external success. For them, the combination of biblical passages and inspirational language reads more like a self-help workshop than a call to discipleship. On the other hand, supporters view his strategy as empowering, contemporary, and useful. An advancement in ministry that teaches people how to rise by meeting them where they are. One of Jakes' legacy's most intricate facets is contained in this tension. The global Christian community continues to debate where to draw the boundaries between empowerment and entitlement, between inspiration and indulgence. Public perception and modern morality. Bishop T.D. Jakes is at the center of a new kind of theological tension that is influenced as much by cultural norms as by biblical interpretation, as society's discussions around gender, sexuality, and identity have changed. Early in his ministry, Jakes echoed traditional evangelical views that saw homosexuality as a sign of brokenness by maintaining a conservative stance on LGBTQ+ issues. But as time went on, his tone and language started to shift. In his sermons and interviews during the 2010s, Jakes shifted from categorical statements to a more nuanced approach, recognizing the variety of experiences within the LGBTQ+ community and calling on churches to comprehend the complexities of the cultural moment. Believe it will vary depending on the church. Every church has a different stance on the matter, and every gay individual is unique. These changes were initially subtle. However, both his supporters and detractors acknowledged that they represented a more significant shift in his opinions. Jake received praise and criticism for his efforts to reconcile his cultural sensitivity with his biblical beliefs. His willingness to listen and his empathy were hailed by progressive believers. Characteristics they believed were severely lacking in the majority of evangelical leaders. His claims that churches should be adaptable and that LGBTQ+ people should be treated with respect struck a chord with a lot of younger Christians and those who were fed up with strict religious doctrine. Jake said in a 2015 interview, "I think it's going to be different from church to church. Every church has a different stance on the matter, and every gay individual is unique." His conviction that there is no one-size-fits-all theology at the intersection of faith and sexuality is reflected in this. At the same time, conservative evangelicals charged him with theological compromise, claiming that his softer language made it difficult to distinguish between approving of actions they felt were forbidden by the Bible and affirming individuals. The conflict between conviction and inclusion became a defining feature of Jake's image, not only within the church but also in general society. Gender roles emerged as yet another point of contention in Jake's developing ethical system. After years of being praised for his conferences and sermons that empowered women, he started questioning conventional ideas of masculinity and femininity in ways that unnerved some of his more conservative supporters. Jake made the argument in a sermon that received a lot of attention that gender roles were no longer socially expected and that a more flexible view of identity and responsibility was necessary for modern living. There was a lot of discussion about these remarks, with some applauding his progressive views and others accusing him of undermining biblical family structures. However, Jakes believed that the emphasis should continue to be on empowering people of all genders to flourish practically, emotionally, and spiritually in a world that is changing quickly. The most distinctive theme of Jake's moral transformation is arguably social justice. He feels the church has overlooked systemic racism, economic inequality, mass incarceration, and educational disparities too frequently, which is why he has been more outspoken than ever in recent years. His message has grown beyond personal healing to include public advocacy. Beyond issues like abortion and same-sex marriage, he has pushed white evangelical leaders to expand their moral agendas, calling on them to address the inequities that disproportionately affect communities of color. Respect in academic and political circles has resulted from this, but it has also heightened criticism from religious conservatives who claim he has strayed from gospel-centered preaching into political activism. Jakes is still dedicated to what he refers to as a whole gospel, which addresses both the suffering in the streets and the soul. In doing so, he traverses the fine line between timeless truth and contemporary relevance, further redefining what it means to be a spiritual leader in the 21st century. A $100 million lawsuit has been filed against musician Sean Diddy Combs, naming world-famous Dallas pastor T.D. Jakes as the defendant. The storm started out subtly, hidden in the complicated legalese of a case that wasn't really about Bishop T.D. Jakes until it was. On March 25, 2024, music producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones filed a shocking lawsuit full of unsettling claims against music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. However, a reference that rocked the church and entertainment industries was hidden deep within the 100-page document. It stated that Combs planned to use his personal relationship with T.D. Jakes to repair his reputation after being accused of abuse on several occasions. Instead of providing evidence of Jakes' wrongdoing, page 47 sparked conjecture because it suggested a covert partnership that appeared to run counter to the bishop's public image. The mere mention was enough to start a flurry of inquiries. How did their relationship progress and what was its nature? With the explosion of social media, conspiracy theories took off almost immediately. Even in the absence of concrete proof connecting Jakes to any illegal activity, internet rumors continued to run amok, fueled by anonymous YouTube accounts and artificial intelligence (AI) generated videos that purported to expose Jakes through fake audio and video. He allegedly attended Combs' exclusive parties, according to some of the videos, while others even implied financial connections or blackmail. In the digital age, rumors have become weapons, and it is now nearly impossible to tell the difference between deepfake manipulation, fiction, and the truth. For a man whose credibility had been the foundation of his platform, Jake was suddenly forced to navigate a digital minefield of deception where perception frequently prevailed over reality. His reputation wasn't the only thing that was attacked. The legitimacy of his entire ministry was in jeopardy. In response, Jakes took an action that few well-known leaders have dared to take in comparable circumstances. He paved the way for radical openness. A few weeks after the lawsuit surfaced, Jakes sued Rodney Jones for $100 million in defamation, claiming the accusations were not only unfounded but also intentionally damaging. In order to demand accountability and the removal of manipulated content, he then filed a lawsuit against the YouTube creators of the most widely shared lies. However, he didn't end there. Jakes made his own church's financial records available to the public, asked a separate group of legal professionals and church officials to examine his ministry, willingly took a polygraph test, and then released the results. These actions were not merely disrespectful. A daring attempt to regain his reputation and establish authority in a scandal-driven media environment, they were offensive. Not because of the accusations per se, but rather because of Jake's response. The incident became a turning point in his public life. In contrast to many public figures who make statements and then back off, Jakes leaned into the fire with an unprecedented degree of candor. His openness conveyed a strong message to the world and his followers. Integrity is demonstrated through confrontation, not by concealment. Additionally, the episode sparked a wider discussion about the responsibility that comes with large platforms and how easily reputations can be harmed in the digital age. For Jakes, it was about preserving the legacy of a ministry that had been developing for decades, not just about clearing his name. Ultimately, the $100 million battle for his name evolved into something more significant. A fight for the truth in a time of manufactured disorder. In your opinion, what aspect of this Pastor T.D. Jakes story was the most tragic? Please share in the comments. We're reading all of them. Please support this video by giving it a thumbs up if you thought it was strong or thought-provoking. Remember to subscribe for more in-depth articles like this one. Take a look at one of the 2 videos on your screen before leaving. We believe they will open your eyes just as much.